Okay, so let's continue. So now one thing I want to do before I go draw the terrain is I want to notice let me just bring this across. Let's come back into the emulator here. You notice I had two graphics. So when you hit the thrust key, I want to have one that has a little flame on the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually add another variable in here called okay, there's that bug. Shift 1 will stop it. Let SP for sprite. Why not? You can make these sprite if you want like a full name in there, but you can't really use the word sprite because the word sprite also a command like that. So you can't use words that are commands in BASIC. So SPR equals 0. Okay, first graphic. And I'll show what I'm going to do with this one. So for start, I'm going to start with 104. So before I do the in key, to check where it's going, I'm going to say let sprite is 0. So let's use the default graphic. Okay. Then I'm going to go down to the thruster, and when you thrust here, it subtracts that value, and I'm going to go let SPR equals, and I know it's number 1 because it's the second graphic. So I'm going to change the sprite if you're holding the spacebar down. And then what I'm going to do in this line here, sprite 0 with the coordinates, I'm going to switch out that 0, which says just use that graphic, just for that little variable name. So it'll get that number 0 or 1. Okay. And let's go to no. Let's save it first in case something bad happens. There we go. Tap the spacebar. Oh, much better. She doesn't look too bad. God, I'm good at this stuff. Okay, definitely gonna need multi-key presses because it's a pain to try and hit the thrust and go left and right at the same time. And we're done. Okay, so let's let us add in a couple of things. Okay, so between 140, in fact, I'm going to change this to 150. Okay, so 140, I want to make sure that we're within the bounds of the screen before we go too far. So we don't want it to go outside the screen. So what I was thinking is originally the plan was to have the ship float and smash into the side. So you had to be quite careful with the left and right thruster so that you didn't bash the side of the screen. But what I'm thinking I might do might be more interesting is to actually maybe make it loop round so it slides up one side and comes in the other. That could be quite interesting. So let's add some code in to make the horizontal one slide from one side and come in the other. So if the X location is smaller than 0, which is that side, then let X equals, and basically it's 256 minus 16 pixels. So we're going to have it, in fact, no, let's have it, yeah, let's do 240, 142, 141, 1 up. If X is greater than 240, then let X equals 0. So if it goes outside the side screen, it'll come back in that side, and if it goes out that side, it'll come in that side. And let's just check that. There we go. There we go. That's pretty good. Whoa. This way as well. Sweet. And that'd be a bit more fun. Okay, so that one will let me go through. In fact, I'm going to put like a little comment in there. 39. Always put like a blank one because I like. Okay, we'll go and check bounds of x/y Y. Okay, it's pretty good. 149, 148. Let's put some comments in there too. We go to 9, 9, 9, 9, 9, 9. Okay, I'm gonna save it before something bad happens. Okay, so it's pretty good. Okay, so I'm gonna go like what was that? 142 F. Okay, so if the Y is less than 0, then he's smacked out the top of the screen. Then, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stop the program there. Now I'm going to change this, obviously, but for sake of just stopping it, just so I can do some testing. So if Y is greater than, so down here, I'm going to say 176. Right, so 176 is 192 minus 16. Go up to the top. Ouch. Okay, what I might do is it flashes off there. So I might go put a beep command. Beep just makes a singular beep sound. 5, 10. It's a 5-second long tone. And we'll do the same here. Let's put like a, I'm not doing it because I want a sound effect. I'm doing it because I just want something to, so when I hit the key, it doesn't flash off so fast. Let's do minus 10. Why not? Yeah, probably 5 seconds is a little too long. So maybe I'll make that. Let's make it 2 seconds. There we go. So let's test it. Okay, so it goes at the side, comes on the other side. Sweet, works sweet. Okay, so you notice that rather than doing that, what I want to do is so I can easily just swap that out to make it do something. So I can put a routine in that blows up the ship, for instance. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually write what we call a proc, a procedure, okay, which is going to be like a little routine, I guess, that is designed just to animate the ship exploding. So I'm going to go, if it's less than 0, then we're going to proc, which is going to call a procedure that I'm going to write. I'll just call it dead for now, and 2 brackets. Okay, I'm going to do the same with this one. I'm going to replace all that nonsense with proc dead. Okay, so I'm going to give a bit of space in here because you never know, after 200 I might want to put some more. I'm going to go like 500. So I'm going to proc dead. Okay, so 5. So to create a proc, we go DEFPROC for defined procedure, and we use the name dead and 2 brackets, bang bang. Okay, so what we're going to do in here is let's animate the explosion like that. So when the player dies, we're going to go for, we go I equals, and it is 6 to 10. So these are the sprite patterns, the graphics for the explosion. And then we're going to go sprite. Okay, and we're going to set sprite 0, which is the ship, x plus BRDR. So we're going to use the same location that it was on the screen, comma, and we want to change the graphic. So I, comma, and 1 for display. And I'm going to make a little bit of a beep there, like 1/10 of a second, comma, minus I. So it'll do basically take minus 6. So it'll take I, 6, and it'll say negative 6 for the sound. So with beeps, as the numbers get smaller, the tone goes down. So I'm going to do that. So it has like a little brrr. And next I. 515. Okay, once it's destroyed, I'm going to come back and I'm going to write this properly with once I've got some more of the program in there. I'm going to just say sprite 0, 0, comma. Now, what I can do, and I can probably change that line before, is if you want to retain the last settings, okay, rather than go x plus bdr, comma y plus bdr, if you just leave it blank, so for instance, you want to say use that same x coordinate. So if we just go comma again, it'll just say I'm going to use, if there's no value here, I'm just going to keep the previous one. And we'll keep the same y. So, and then we don't care about the sprite, that's fine. But it's the display flag at the very end, the one that we have number 1, which says draw on screen. We can change that to 0, which means it says disable, don't draw on the screen anymore. Okay, and maybe I'll just stop it there. So let's go beep 1, comma minus 20 stop. Okay, and 520. In fact, let's make it 550 because we may want to come back, get rid of that, and put some other effects in there. 550 end proc. You need that at the end because as def proc starts it, end proc finishes it. Okay, so I know that I can do this. So in here, I don't really need to add those in. I can just leave those blank and it'll just recycle the settings that were there already. Okay, let's go to 9999. Just make sure it's saved. Run. Let's get the top. Sweet. Let's run it again. Let's crash into the ground. Okay, here we go. No thrust. Cool. Perfect. Okay, so that's done. Shit's flying. Wow. Amazing. So let's add in the landscape, which is a terrain is what I was going to add originally anyway. And see, I've kind of gone the long way around to finish off the ship first. So I'm going to say 600. I'm going to make 6. Two. Okay, so 605. I'm going to go def proc and call it terrain. Okay, now what I need to do is I've got a whole list of values in here, right, that I kind of wrote down. So I need to kind of use all these values to draw my terrain. So instead of actually writing a bunch of code that's going to go through and, you know, line 1, print sprite, whatever, at this value, this value, this value, this graphic, I'm going to use some data. So data is like a collection of numbers that we can read, like from a list, I guess, in a way. You're kind of reading a list of values and then you're using them. So we're going to go for I. I'm using I a lot for index or I for loops. It's just, it seems to be a common thing. So it's going to be 0 to 15. So it's basically going to be 16 sprites across, right? So I had 16 wide. So I is going to count from 0 through to whatever. I'm going to put these on separate lines so it kind of extrapolate it out, make it a bit clearer. Okay. So I'm going to go read A, comma B. Okay, A and B are just going to read 2 values from our little data collection. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go sprite. And I'm going to use sprite. I can't use sprite 0, that's the ship. So that's going to be a bit of a problem. If I go sprite I, it's going to replace the ship with a different thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use sprites 5 to 21. So go 5 plus I. So I know kind of a range of sprite numbers that I need to check for to see if the ship's crashed into it. So I'm going to start at sprite 5. Why not? You know, may as well. And it's going to be the physical location. The x coordinate will be 0 to 15, so it'll be I. And we go times 16 because it's 15. Each one is 16 pixels apart. And we also need to go plus BRDR because we need to keep it shifted on the screen. Comma. Okay, A and B are going to be reading y coordinate and sprite value. So y coordinate will be an A plus, which is going to also be the tile location. So it's times 16 plus BRDR. So it moves it, prints on the screen. Comma. And the sprite pattern is going to be the second number we've read. So that's B, comma, and then 1 to say draw it on the screen. 625, next I. And 630. In fact, let's go 650, get a bit of spacing in there. End proc. So we're finishing, and it should exit back out. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set some data in here. And I might do it at like line 700, why not? 701. Landscape. Sprites. And I'm going to put like a little bit of note in there so I know what these are. Y location sprite pattern. Okay. Okay, so data is pretty straightforward. You just go 705. Okay, so it's just the word data, and then we just put the numbers in. So let's have a look at the numbers I wrote down. 3, 11, 5, 11, 10, 3, 10, 5. All of these I've actually just calculated by hand, written them down. You saw my little list that I wrote. Let's break it up across a few lines. 4, 11, 3, 11, 5, 11, 5, 11, 5, 10, 3. Okay, 715. And we have a few more, so 9, 3, 9, 5, 9, 5, 9, 5. Pow. Okay. Now, one thing we need to do before we run this, and we check that out, is before we do that read, or before we do the loop for the read, we need to basically, if we're going to use a lot of data in our program, we need to just, first of all, tell the basic program, what line does the data start on? Where should I start looking for data commands or data lines? So you do it with the command restore, and you point it to line 700 to say, okay, before you start doing read, look from line 700 down until you find some lines with data on them. Okay, so that should work. Let's find out if it does. So it's called proc terrain. So that should happen probably, we'll scroll the way up, before the game loop. Now we don't want to end the game loop because we don't have to keep redrawing the screen and redrawing the screen each time. So we need to draw it at the very beginning. So let's put it in line 50. And go proc terrain. Okay, so let's go to that. Call it 2, so it's a lunar R02. Okay, I like to save it in increments like that. In case 1 craps itself, you can always go back a version. So I don't want the one with that part in. Let's go back to version 1. Okay, let's run. And let's get ready to... Whee! Look at that. Now, it didn't quite work. Something weird going on there. We can fly through the landscape and smash at the bottom. Okay, so something didn't quite work there. So let's see if we can work out what was going on. So So mathematics I times 16 plus BDR. So multiplies always happen first. Okay. And then it's A, which is the Y coordinate. Nope, got in the wrong order. Okay, my mistake. It should be sprite pattern Y location. Okay, so always pay attention when you're writing these things down as you go. Okay, so this release, it should be B, A. Okay, always going to be some excitement around when Kev's writing this stuff, honest. There we go, and it still looks wrong, so let's see if we can work out what's going on there. As you can see, what I've done is I've actually put some of these numbers in the wrong order. So 411, and I've written them down in a weird order as well. So it looks like I've kind of flipped them around while I was writing them down. I didn't pay attention. These are the sort of things that happen though, so it's a good example of things that go wrong. 10. Okay, then it's the other way around. 3, 9, 5, 9, 5, 9, 5, 9. Okay, fingers crossed. Right. Yes. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to definitely have to change. Oh, and it crashed. Okay. So definitely going to have to change the that border color from blue. So let's make it black as well. So at the very top border, I made it blue so you could see the border. Ah, perfect. Look at that. Now you notice one thing. The ship can pass through. And that's because it draws it. The draw order on the screen is always from the lowest to the highest. So 0, which is our character, or our player ship is the first one, and then everything else gets drawn on top. Now if we want to make that different, we can just change that to a high number. Doesn't matter which one. If you wanted to, you could make it sprite 99. That's always above everything else. Why not? We just have to make sure that we're in here. We just change these things. Lucky it's not too many places in here. Okay, one thing you can do if you're planning to fiddle around with some of these numbers, and you know the sprite for the player might change, sometimes it's worth defining a kind of a constant or a variable that you then put in here instead, and then you just declare at the top going player sprite is 99, and it just uses it in there instead of an actual physical number. It's what we call hard coding, okay, which is great in some cases, but not so great when you need to tweak something and it's in 20 different places. Okay, so let's save that. Let's there we go. Now we're on top. Not that it really matters, because when we hit the landscape, it's going to disappear anyway. Okay, so let's add in the landscape, and then we'll save it there. And we're up to 24 minutes on the recording. And what we'll do is we'll kind of save it. We'll move on, and in the next video we'll add the restaurants, astronauts, not restaurants, and also the docking thing, just to finish off the game. So, well, finish off the next part of the game, I should say. So we've got the check bounds. Okay, so what I tend to do in the order I tend to put these things in, so that 300, okay. what I tend to do things is I'll look for the input from the player, I'll do the update for the values, then I'll draw the graphics, and then I'll just finish off by quickly checking has anything crashed after all that. So let's go 180, bit of gap in there in case we need to do anything. Oh, in fact, no, let's 160, 161. As player crashed into landscape. Okay. So here we're going to ask for collision information. So we want to check if sprite number 99 has it hit any of the sprites between 5 and 21, which are the ones that make up the landscape. So let's have a look how we do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find out a little bit of documentation on that, because one thing that I can not always remember is the exact documentation for these commands, because they were added as the versions of basic increase or improve and expand. Then the extra features get added to like an update document, right? So you'll find that if you've been downloading all the cores, or even on the Spectrum Next itself, if you go under the core where you have all the files that you normally use to put onto SD card when you update your machine, under docs folder, NextZXOS, there is NextBasic new commands and features. Okay, and that contains some PDFs. And this one, we'll have a look, scroll through, are a bunch of new features and updates. So here's the sprite section. Okay, in that version they added 128 sprites instead of 64 sprites. Okay, bank offset. Okay, we got all that. We're looking for we'll look at some of that stuff later as well. Looking for sprite collision. Okay, so we're looking here. It's this one here, bounding box collision detection, which means basically within the squares of each other. Okay, so sprite over bracket the sprite, which is sprite 99, comma, and then we can put a range of sprites to check against. Okay, and then you can have some overlap. So if you don't want it like exactly edge to edge, we can give it like a couple of pixels so I can just cut slightly through, and that might make it, might be worth doing that to make it a little less frustrating if it's too exact. So I might give it like a 2 pixel kind of overlap. So let's have a look. Sprite over, and you notice it also needs the % sign, because this returns, it's an integer operation, which basically means it returns an integer value, and these we'll look at later on when we start talking about things like optimization to use integer values and integer variables. So I'll move this to one side, and we should be able to add this in pretty easy. So we go if, oops, okay, so it's % and it's sprite, not sprint, sprite over, okay, and looking at the parameters. So first one is our player sprite 99, and the other ones are going to be our terrain sprites. So I know it starts at 5, 2 should be 21, so that's 5 plus 16, comma, and I want to just give them an X and a Y overlap, so of about 2 pixels, so 2, 2. Okay, now what happens is if there's no collision, it returns sprite over blah 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 will equals 0. So if it's not, so if it's hit one of those, because it's only testing between 5 and 21, then, and I'll just go proc dead. Okay, so if it collides with the landscape, it's going to die. Okay, so I'm going to go to, in fact, I'm going to list 999. Let's set this version 3. Let's go run. Pretty good. Okay. That's so happens when I kind of get slightly cuts into it. Let's just check. Can I go lower than that? Oh, I can. Oh, look at that. Look at that. Look at that. Can I crash into it? So it looks like our terrain's working. Perfect. Okay. Okay, so that was pretty easy for the terrain. Now the characters, the astronauts, are going to be no different. It's really just going to be placing them and looking for a collision. So let's have a look how to do that. So we're going to do that in the next video. I'm going to stop the video here because we've hit the 30-minute mark. I'm going to try and keep these to 30 minutes at most. So I'll see you in the next video.